It is April 25th, 2024, and we're visiting tonight with Coach Bill McClendon. I'm John Osgatharp. We have Ricky Miller here, and we appreciate Coach McClendon for letting us come into his home tonight to talk to us for a few minutes.
Well, I'm proud that you're here.
And with Ricky here, there's no telling how long we'll get to talk. You two get to start.
Yeah, we've got a little history stuck in us.
Coach, you might just give us a little first outline of yourself. Maybe when you got out of Tompkinsville High School, where you went to college before you came back and started teaching and coaching, and maybe why you got into teaching and coaching.
Okay. I guess the first part there, the reason for the teaching and coaching was I fell in love with a little girl. And so that stopped that and put me into the teaching profession. But let's see, what else was it you was wanting there?
I guess.
Well, I graduated in 1955.
Yeah.
We were the Black and Gold Bears then. And after 55, I went to Western and got my degree there. And come back, went to teaching, as I said. And I didn't start coaching from the beginning. I started teaching in 59, and I didn't start coaching till 67. But I'd been out on the field every day at practice, and after, of course, I lived just up the street there. Yeah. And I'd stay around and watch them. Frank had, I believe it's Cecil Petty, John Conkin Mars, and Leslie Carter, I believe, were his assistants. And then, of course, John got killed that year, 67. And so Cecil went to athletic director, and I think Leslie went to maybe the elementary.
And of course, Coach Frank Petty in the mid-60s was at Glasgow. When did he start at Tompkinsville?
He started, 65, I believe.
65, 66 school year.
That's right. Yeah. He was...
and what, Clifton Carter before him?
Clifton was the coach before him, and I don't know, I think he had some problems, and Frank took the job then and come over. He had good teams. He had, Leslie and them all knew how to coach and whatnot. But then in 67, when John Conkin died, as I said, they all just sort of split up and left Frank sitting by himself. And so he come and asked me if I would had any entertaining thoughts about coaching. I said, well, yeah, I have. And so he asked me if I wanted to take it, and so I said, yeah. And that's how we ended up, two of us.
Of course, I told you a few days ago, and I told Ricky, I want to hear Ricky's thoughts on all these things too, because he was in that time frame. He was he was young. He was just getting into high school about that time. The one thing was your neighbors there across the street on 5th and Lake.
Sean Boys.
Or the Bashans. And you guys were talking about him there a few minutes ago. There was a young man, I think you said he started playing in the 8th grade.
Bill.
And it just seemed like, of course, I was a young kid at that time. That family, it seemed like that was the beginning. And it may have been, instead of just him, you and Frank, but he was part of the beginning of some very good years of football.
Yes, we had some good teams during those years. As a matter of fact, we've had good teams all the way up to, till I quit, really, I thought.
Yeah. Now, what made him able to play as an 8th grader, and then how did he develop, through his high school years?
Well, of course, Bill was the big man to start with, and that didn't hurt. He was a big man when he was in 8th grade, and he had the skills really already, didn't he, really?
Yeah, and of course he took 8th grade over.
Doc had them all in line to take it over and got an extra year. Of course, you could do that. Most of them took it over in the 8th grade, didn't they?
Yeah.
And that's mainly how, and he just developed from there. He was older and as
So for his age, I get he was a lot bigger than.
Oh yeah.
Even
And he had that quickness even at that age, you know.
Very athletic for his size. Sure was.
Of course, he played basketball also, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Played it well.
Yes,
When Bill Bashan said a screen in basketball, it was a block.
oh, honey. Oh, Bill, him and Larry Ford.
yeah.
He'd fight it out every day. Larry, of course, just had enough in him to want to try to, but he couldn't.
Over
He
the
couldn't.
the plank.
yeah, over the plank. Put him on the plank.
Now, what's the plan?
I guess he was a 4x2 or about that wide, you know. They just whatever, blow the
We
whistle.
put him on the reason for the plank was to make them keep their feet apart. And he'd stand say straddle of the plank and then block or do whatever you wanted to the other one. And every day it'd be Bill and Larry. And
The ground would shake when they blow the whistle.
he tried. But Bill was just, he's too much.
We may have to bring the plank drill back in.
Well, it wouldn't hurt, I'll tell you.
So I assume he played both ways, offense and defensive line.
Yeah. Sure did.
Where was
He
he
made-
at on the offensive line?
Tackle. Wasn't he, Ricky?
Mhm,
Yeah, he was
Now,
tackle.
was Larry the other tackler? Or
Yeah,
on the same
Larry,
side?
no, Larry was the other tackle on the other side. And let's see, I can't remember that Rick Caldwell here. Who was the guards?
I'd say,
John Baker?
yeah, getting on up toward Bill's junior and senior year, yeah.
Yeah. In 60.
Graduated
67.
68, be his last football
67.
season. Yeah, fall 67.
And Larry graduated 68. Oh, was he?
Yeah, it's same
68?
age, yeah.
Yeah. Joe Hood.
Yeah. And defensively, was he-
Howman was the center. Remember?
Yeah, Jim Hyman.
Jim Howman. Yeah.
And I'd say Roy Sims was the center about the time Bill was in 8th grade. That
Yeah.
put him back there, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know for a long time. Roy Sims made that East-West All-Star team.
I know.
I've heard Joe Howard tell how strong he was.
He was. He was really strong.
on the defensive side, was he tackle on that side also, or?
Yeah, of course we run the 4 and the 5, so you know it put them both sort of in the middle, and they took care of that part, and you had all the rest, you know, to fill in on the ends. But they was we run the 5, I guess, a little more. Frank was diddling with the 4. He'd been to Western, of course they were running it, and he'd been down there checking it out, and we put it in right after that, I guess.
I want to stop right here. Don't fail to mention that you taught in a one-room school.
I did.
One of the few left.
Oh, Lordy. I'd say I was one of the few left.
You are.
Yeah.
Where was it?
Bethlehem. Darrell called me in and said, I want you to do me a favor. Of course, I thought I was going to the high school to teach science. And I said, what's that? He said, I want you to go to Bethlehem and teach out there 1 year. Then we're going to close them down, some of them. I said, ooh, wee. I said, are you sure you want me out there? He said, well, you won't have but 8 students maybe at the most. And I said, well, I guess I can give it a try. And so I got out there and I had 9 students, but had 1 in every grade, 1 through 8.
You didn't consolidate some of them in the same grade. did you?
Well, yeah, I did. I had a sister to the little first grader, so she was about halfway his teacher. And then he finally, after about 2 months, they took him out. He quit. And I was the happiest man in the world. Trying to get all those classes in, not knowing what I was doing to start with. But I had a good time out there. We really did. Didn't have a lot of players, but we'd play softball. We'd go to Ebenezer and we'd go on Friday.
Yeah.
And it's the old lines.
Cecil?
No,
Orby.
No, not Cecil.
Wouldn't Orby?
Well, it could have been. I can't think of his name. Anyway, he was known for having the best softball team in the county. He had some big old boys that come in there on Friday and he'd play them.
They just come one day a week.
Yeah. And we went down there and we beat him somehow. I don't know. And he absolutely had a fit. But now that was the way it was back then. Friday was the day of softball or some kind of ball, or you'd go and have what is that? Ciphering. Oh boy, have some of the. Let's see, who was it? Brother Richie.
Yeah.
He'd come up on Friday and want to cipher. Of course, I had a little girl who was pretty good, smart, and she was good with her math, on the board and spelling and all that.
Yeah.
And he come up, he took over, and he had a little girl. She could make marks on the blackboard, and that was their ciphering.
I've heard about
And
that.
we planned all week long, got ready for that. Spelling and doing all this, getting hope ready.
It was just how many marks you could make.
Yeah, in a minute. And then you get another one. So they wasn't much thinking to that.
Now, we used to cipher in the 8th grade, but now
You were doing it right.
Yeah, it was multiplication and big long numbers. Add these numbers.
We was ready for that, but we wasn't ready for the marks on the blackboard.
No, that didn't require much.
No, nothing. So he pulled one on me there.
Well, to close out on Mr. Bill Bashan, of course, he went on to the University of Kentucky and had a 4-year career up there.
Yes, he did. He played. I don't think he played his first year. I can't remember. Do you?
Well, freshmen couldn't play no way.
No, you're right. You're right.
And like I said, we was calling they have a JV. Lots of colleges would. They, of course, had a few sophomores, maybe a junior or two on it.
Mm-hmm.
But he pretty well played JV schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, Rick, you said, his final year, and he was on the defensive side in the UK, but his final year he was a starter. Is that right?
Yeah, and I believe he broke in about midway through his junior year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe somebody got hurt, and there was a senior, and of course, was gone the next year. And he, I know when I looked at that scrapbook that Sue made on them all, somehow she would have articles from Atlanta when they played Georgia and the Nashville, Tennessee, and I know when they're getting ready to play Vandy, the Vandy coach was just remarking how tough and the other tackle was good too. He said Kentucky's got the best 2 defensive tackles in the SEC.
SEC. Well, Bill.
Of course, I didn't know who he was at the time. I found out quick about who Richard Morris was. You remember Richard?
Yeah, he was my favorite referee.
That next year we was playing Warren Central down there. Of course, we was beating them pretty good. And it was late in the game. I was on second team. I was on defensive. Went rushing through and just getting ready to get to the quarterback. And, old halfback boy. I mean, he just grabbed me and held me big time. And rolled to the ground with still a hold of me, and Richard Morris walked up and pulled his flag out of his pocket, and he told that little boy, he said, "You like to hold so much," he said, "just hold on to this, and I'll be back in a few minutes." That old boy held it.
Hey, Richard Morris, Lord have
Yeah, I remember him calling basketball.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me and him had some good conversations during the game. Oh, man. What was see if you remember, the official, I believe he was at Cave City, and he was a highway patrolman. And he was one of the better officials that
Melvin Perkins?
Melvin Perkins. I've been trying to think of him for 2 months. I'm not kidding you. Melvin Perkins.
Tall.
Yeah, good. He was a good official too.
I saw his obituary.
Did
Just
you?
accidentally saw it. It's been a few years ago now. He's been
Yeah.
dead a few years. Yeah.
Oh,
I remember
man.
seeing his obituary.
He was good, boy.
When he
And
made the call,
he meant him.
he'd arch that back.
Hey, Melvin Perkins. I could not think of that. But I liked him.
It's hard to get
Of course,
on.
he knew too. I'd vote for him every time for official of the year and SKAC and all that stuff.
Hard to argue much with the state trooper.
Oh,
Of course, we told Coach Mack we wanted to for sure get on to the fall of '69, but we've talked about Bill Bashan. Of course, he came along in the mid '60s. But the other thing we wanted to talk a little bit about, the other thing that happened in the mid '60s, of course, at the beginning of the '60s, '50s, and then the '60s, Tompkinsville was not integrated. And by the time you got to that '68, '69 team, we had people like the guys by the name of Hamiltons and Tooley's and Evans. What was it like? Were you there? You might not have been there the first year that we had integration. The man you mentioned is playing the center. Was he a black man?
no, Roy Sims.
Roy Sims.
No,
He was
they-
white.
Of course, Larson is the same name.
Yeah. How did that go initially? The integration of the teams, was it a smooth process?
Yes, it was. It was very smooth. We really, I got to tell you the truth, we inherited some good athletes from whatever school they come from, because they, let's see, Paul Hammond, Lawrence Sims, Norman Hamilton, Norman Eagle,
Big Gray's boy.
Big Gray,
Carl, not Carl, but the other one. Yeah,
and we got some great athletes, and
good people too.
yes, they were, and I believe they set the mode for the younger ones.
Yeah.
Because they were all, they played. They was there on Saturday night. And Norman, and I know when we went to Gallatin, they like to kill him down there. But anyway, that just led to one thing to the other, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The other boys and girls followed him and followed them, not him. But Paul Evans, he played on this team that you're getting ready to talk
We'll
about.
talk about him. I can remember him.
But we had some good others in there that started it. They didn't have to hang with it, but they did.
Yeah.
And
I always
I think
heard
that helped the recruiting from there on, as you would call it.
I always heard that Randall Grider got, I don't know whether it would have been late in the May, before they came in August, but they got all the students together and say, the blacks are coming, and I want them treated well and all, and I've heard them talk, of course they were scared to death, they were when they came over here, but how well the other students treated them. I know my sister Joyce fell down the steps, last 3 or 4 steps coming down from the 3rd floor to the 2nd after a class, and 2 or 3 walked by and sort of laughed at her and all. And Faunus Pipkins, when he got there, he helped her up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's brought that up a few years ago. She said, I'll never forget that.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, that's the way it should have been, but, you know, if that had happened back in the 50s or whatever, he would have been in trouble for doing that.
Yeah.
But of course, we know what he did was what should have been done, and things. Of course, we know, you know, around '68 things were bad and all through the country. But it was good to, I guess, maybe being in a more rural area, maybe things can go a little smoother when we don't think about what's going on in the big cities or whatever.
It really did. But no, we had no problems with it. With the ball players, and I don't think we had many, you know, problems anywhere else. Maybe a little fuss or a fight or something every now and then, but mainly everything went pretty good and pretty smooth.
I asked Norman Eagle while we're at Burkesville, he used to barbecue there at the softball tournament they'd have at Burkesville, and I went over and talked to him a few minutes. I said, what's the most, how far back do you remember somebody playing that you saw play? He said, I didn't see nobody play. He said, we was too scared to come over there. And that, you know, it surprised me.
Yeah.
He said we could hear the announcer, we could hear him talking about the game over the PA.
Yeah.
And he said it was just another world, and that's, I thought how sad things were, but they were better off here than they were a lot of places in the South, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, I thought it, I don't know why it was scared. I know there was a reason behind it, but I thought it went real smooth. In '68 when that did?
No, it was earlier.
Earlier?
Yeah.
67?
The first,
63?
I believe the first ones that graduated was 65.
The first class?
And Norman Eagle was up there.
And it seemed like I've seen like annual yearbooks of people like Larry Tim and those years. I don't, might not have been back that far, I don't know, but yeah, somewhere there in the mid-60s. I know by the time I was in first grade, of course in third grade, Maud Crawford was my third grade teacher, and I thought she was the greatest thing that had ever been. She's one of the best teachers I ever had. But of course, I'd had two good ones, the first and second too. I had Tempe Graves and Christina Chappell.
You did have some good teachers,
yeah, I had really good teachers to get started, and Miss Maud Crawford was one of them. Before we get to '69, we've got a stat book here for the previous year, and that was a good year as well. Well, let's talk about one other game that you had turned to there a little bit earlier. The Madison, Tennessee game was a tie, and we'll talk about a tie here, another tie here a little bit later. But you and and I think Ricky mentioned that maybe this tie on September the 13th of 1968, that was a Friday. That was Friday the 13th. That was their only blemish. Did you say, Ricky?
That's what I was told.
And they won the Tennessee State
They
Championship.
didn't win. They got beaten in the final.
Okay.
But that was the only blemish up until the championship game.
What was it like playing those Tennessee teams? Right. This was in the fall of '68. How did we get hooked up with Madison, Tennessee?
You know, I'm not real sure of that. I think we were needing the game, and couldn't find nobody in Kentucky. And Frank went to wallering around down in Tennessee and picked up Madison. And listen, you better put your headgear on, strap it on good when you play those Tennessee teams.
Yeah.
Every one of them, they know how to play the game. And of course, we'd go across the border. They'd whoop us. They'd come across here, our border, we'd whip them. So you just kept the thing going. But I thought that Madison game, I can't remember. It seemed like we made them dress in the old band hall. Do you remember that? They had the dress in the band hall. Down there, used to be down. Yeah. On the creek.
Yeah, it was a little gym back.
And they come back after the game was over, of course, I had to go down there to dress, and they put in the paper that there was snakes and lizards and everything in the world in their shoes and stuff in that old band hall that we were put in. Old building, they called it.
Well, where did we dress? Because that was before the gymnasium was over there.
Underneath the stage.
Under the stage.
Stage, yeah.
That's where the Bears dressed.
We dressed there for years and years.
Yeah.
And came out the 4th Street
Came
end
out
of
the
the high
4th.
school.
Exactly.
And I'll tell you where the visitors dressed a whole lot was under that ag shop, wasn't it?
Yes,
There's a
they were.
dressing room under that old ag shop.
I know that we were dressing down there in 55. And let's see, I guess all the way up to the new building.
Yeah.
And that was, what year did we open that? 60.
What, the gym?
Yeah, 68.
68.
Fall of I was asking Eddie about that today. Yeah.
That's what I
I
think
think it was his senior year. Eddie Profit.
Yeah.
Well, of course, they built a new school in 50, so like you said, you dressed underneath it. I wonder where they dressed before 50. Reckon the old gym over there had any place?
The old gym was, yeah. Old gymnasium.
The gymnasium.
Yeah, that's where you dressed. Everybody was around there. And they had a little old shower down there. I wouldn't have stepped in it for nothing. It was dark and black and slimy. Oh, Lord, it was terrible. But let's see, that went on till the gym burnt, didn't it?
Yeah.
So, and then I think I can't remember, it seemed like we dressed in that old lunchroom that sit out there at the end of the football field. Do y'all remember that?
Yeah, no, but I know the lunchroom was right next to it, wasn't it?
Yeah, and they started storing after they did away with it, football stuff and whatnot. Some of it was there. And then to the basement of the underneath the auditorium.
Yeah. Now, I was looking at some newspapers a week or so ago, and it said the 68 team was 8-1-1. Of course, the one tie would have been that Madison game.
And it don't take 3 guesses to know who the one loss was, does it?
Oh, man.
Would it have been the Scotties?
Yep, over there on their field.
I guess that's in here. We won't talk about that game.
It's about 20.
We'll talk about the one the next year.
20-7 or something like that.
Yeah. But the last game of that year, we had a running back named John Carroll Hamilton that I guess the coaches and I guess the fans maybe too knew that he was in the running for maybe the leading scorer in the state of Kentucky. Of course, John Carroll that was his junior year, wasn't it? So we were playing Warren County, and you said Coach Pettit decided he was going to do something to try to sort of get John Carroll maybe some publicity in Tompkinsville.
Exactly. We were going to go let him score probably, as many as he could. And the coach of Warren County was Jim Martin. He was a buddy of mine that we studied when I was in college. And Frank told me to tell him that what we was going to do. And so I went to Jim after they got off the bus, and I said, Jim, we're going to turn John Carroll loose this ball game. He said, well, go ahead. Says, if we can't catch him, we can't catch him. And after it was all over, it ended up, 81 to 30. And, of course, we sort of let them score those 30 points so John Carroll could get the ball again.
Yeah, the fourth quarter was 28-18.
And he, let's see,
How many John scored in the fourth quarter?
that's what I was trying to say here. I lost it.
He scored the last one. Let's see, who was third? Paul scored the one before that. and Leroy scored the one before that. So that's one.
27.
So he scored
27.
2. He scored the first one and the last one in the fourth quarter.
Well, he scored. What did he score? 8? No.
He scored 8 touchdowns.
Okay, 4 and 4, right?
Yeah, and I was trying to add up the points, and Ricky was the one that told me the two. We call it the 2-point conversion now. If you ran it in, you didn't get 2 points.
No, it's 1 all the way.
Yeah. So
And he run 3 of those in, I believe.
he ran 3 of those in.
51 then.
Yeah.
I've seen it 3 or 4 times. Can't never remember that number in my head for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I was adding it up, and I said, well, he scored more than that. But Ricky told me there a year ago, you only got 1 point if you ran it in. So he scored 8 touchdowns and had 3 extra points for a total of 51 out of the 81. And he, what was it, 276 yards rushing, and Paul Bashan
had
167. So together, they had over 400 yards apiece, or 400 yards together rushing.
Well, that was that was just, us trying to get John to the top. But the sad part of that story is there was a man named Gully, and where was he?
McHale.
McHale. And he was the one that John was in the running against. But we thought we had got enough points in this game. And that son of a gun, he scored, I forgot how many,
I believe he
and
scored
beat John out.
He scored every point in the game.
I believe he did too, Ricky.
About 70-0, they beat some team. Wayland,
And we had played in the afternoon.
No, and they knew, they had us.
That was October the 8th, 1968. Bob Boyles kept the stats that year. We got his stat book.
That Warren Central game was October the 8th?
That's what he's got there.
That ain't right.
Okay, he just wrote the month wrong. The previous game was November the 1st.
Okay, yeah. I know.
Yeah, that's right. It's November the 8th.
Yeah.
Instead of October the 8th of 1968. Yeah, you had played on down in November.
Well, we played that game during the day, didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, it was on Friday afternoon,
Yeah.
Friday day.
I'd say that's why they went out to school.
School and everything.
Because John was the
John
show.
was going to perform.
So you had let everybody know. Well, of course, John didn't do it on his own.
No.
Did the line sort of take it as a challenge to be able to give him the
I
hope?
think so, very much so. And they were, they did their job too. Of course, Warren County wasn't overloaded.
They weren't like the Joe Hood teams.
No way. They were a little on the weak side then. You wouldn't think they would be in Warren County, but they were.
Of course, they've won some the last couple of years, but they just went through a 50-something game losing streak for several years. But but they're back.
Are they back a little?
Yeah, they won 4 or 5 a couple of years ago. So they are back a little bit.
Oh.
But 1969, the fall of '69 was that team was the one we really wanted to talk to you a little bit about. Of course, John Carroll would have been a senior that year. What would Paul Bashan have been?
Senior.
He was the same age, same class.
All of them was in the same class. Billy Joe Williams, Ricky Ross,
Rodney Dickerson, Paul Evans, Ronnie Davis. Them 4 guards was, especially, of course, Paul's defensive, forte, but between Ricky Ross and Ronnie Davis and Rodney Dickerson, you had 3 good. Frank usually sent the plays in, rotated them guards, sent the plays in by the guards.
Sure did.
Yeah, that Billy Joe Williams told me that this week. Yeah. I think he was one of the guards.
He was one of them. He sure was. They did a great job, though. Those boys on that line.
Gary Spears,
George
Earl Miller. Yeah. There's about 12 of them.
And they
Tommy.
They did a great job for John Carroll and Paul. Paul was a good runner too.
Now how did you line them up in the backfield usually back? Were they split
We
backs,
was
I
in, we was in I formation, usually I formation. John at tailback and Paul at fullback.
Yeah.
And then you had the choice. And it made it tough, I want to tell you. Because they was both great runners.
Yeah.
John locked it over there in that ditch line, didn't he?
Yeah.
Toward the stands? Or
Yeah, getting that ditch line, he gone. Hey, Lordy. But you said in that game he had 280,
Yeah, 270.
and Paul had 150 something. So.
Yeah.
I bet John had over 5, if not 7 or 8 touchdowns called back.
Yeah.
On clipping, it was about 10 yards behind him. He done a run by the Coach Pettit say, boys, when you see John Carroll's rear end, don't be a block.
He's gone. Yeah. He's gone. Well, the first game of that year, you went up to play Mount Sterling, and I can remember all through my high school years of seeing the big trophy.
Monstrous.
The recreational bowl. Now they did have the score of that game in the newspaper, and it talked about the fact we had 29 players, that team, that at the beginning of the year, and it said we beat them 16-6. What do you remember about that Mount Sterling team, the trip to Mount Sterling?
Well, I don't remember a lot now, but I did. Listen, they had a good team because they went on and won the, I guess what, Class A championship.
Yeah.
But we had a tough game with Russellville on a Monday, and it nearly just killed us, both teams.
Of course,
And we come back and had to play Bardstown, on that Friday, and they wouldn't give up and made us come anyway. And so that led to us losing, and then Bardstown going on and playing Mount Sterling.
Yeah.
And Mount Sterling beat the fool out of them. And we'd done beat Mount Sterling.
Yeah. I guess it was in that game, or no, it was, it might have been that game that it mentioned John Carroll and Paul Bershon, but it also mentioned George Earl Miller. What position did George Earl play?
Wingback, wasn't it? We run the wing quite a bit then.
Yeah, we did. Sure did.
Yeah. And Ricky, do you remember anything about that game?
Remember it well.
That first game?
Yeah, I just remember how hot it was. It was still in August, I guess, wasn't it?
The schedule said August the 30th.
Yeah, it was a sizzler. But we laughed about it when Bill on the Hall of Fame, I told it, when we played the game, there was 2 games. They would have a Class A, 2 Class A teams would play in the afternoon, and then they'd, take a break, and then they'd bring in 2 AA teams. I remember Paducah Tillman was playing Covington Catholic in the AA game that night, but anyway, they wanted us to come back and get the trophy at halftime of the late game, They wanted to bring us out there and present it, and of course we agreed to that, So we went and ate. We went, of course, to a steakhouse, and we come back, and the road was coming up, and the bus, they started parking beside the road, and the more we went up there toward the stadium, the more the cars was pinching the road, and then finally, Coach Pettit was driving. He said, I can't get through there. He said, I'll sideswipe some of them. I don't know whose idea it was, but they loaded about 8 of us out there. And we'd get about 4, on one side and 4 in the front, and he would come and lift and slide. And we just slide them cars over. We move about that far, and they give the bus enough room. Lift and slide.
I remember that well.
And then we got hung on the what's it called, new circle that goes around Lexington. We circled it about 3 times trying to find the right exit.
And the trophy was the big Robert Bowles had to bring it home, and his, what'd you say it was?
Fairlane GT. Yeah. 67 Fairlane yellow
had
GT.
Put it in the back seat.
So Bob came in handy.
Bob, he was real handy. He was a great stat keeper.
You remember what famous, noteworthy pro player and was up? Remember they had the Hall of Fame of people that they had MVPs. You remember Paul Horn's name being up there? He played Flat J.
Yeah, he played in the recreational
He played in the recreational bowl, and he was MVP. And there was Paul Horn and Flat J.
What do you say?
Yeah.
What was the MVP the year we played?
Paul was young.
You know, I couldn't remember that now. That slipped me.
I'll tell you another story about that. John Carroll, Roger Anderson. You remember Roger used to be mad? John said, "Get my jerseys hanging in there," and Roger didn't get it and got up there at Mount Sterling. John didn't have his jersey. And they brought an extra one or two, and they put on like 20. John, I think, was 24. And I think they put 26 on him. We was warming up, and some of I don't know where his announcers were. They come on the field and said, "Where's he at?" Of course, they know about John. Where were you hiding him? He's supposed to be 24. They know 24 out there.
Trying to disguise it.
Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't have taken too long to pick him out. Once you started pitching it to him.
One more I thought about the game. Leroy threw an interception midway in the first quarter, pretty deep. And they went on and scored and went up 6-0. And then the following kickoff, Leroy ran it back all the way. Yeah. And we got 8-7-6, and then we finally, tacked another one on them and beat them.
Yeah.
Leroy was, he was thrown in there. The other quarterback had quit us.
Yeah.
And was thrown in, and he did a great job, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well, I wrote the names down there, but I didn't write it. Don't know if it was the Mount Sterling game. The next game was Somerset. It was 42-0 that we beat them. I guess it might have been the first game. We'll mention a little bit, and Ricky probably can remember when it happened, and you might too. Of course, you had the two quarterbacks, Max Anderson and Leroy Tooley, but as you said, Max didn't finish the season.
No.
Can you remember what game he left the team?
It was the next game he got hurt. Now, him and Leroy, both quarterbacks, come in the Mount Sterling game. They were, when one of them would be split in, the other would be quarterback.
Yeah.
And then Max he dislocated that thumb playing basketball the winter before, and then he got banged up a little, and he just said he was going to concentrate on basketball, and he didn't play no more football. Yeah. And that was the second Somerset game, which the record will show that a reserve tackle scored his only touchdown in his career. Do I have a horn to blow somewhere?
Was it our Miller?
It was. But I'll bring you, this is the truth. I was playing tackle. It was over there toward the school. It was on that school side, and they had the ball about the 25, 28-yard line. And when we looked at the film on them, Coach Mack had said when they split the halfback out a little wider, they like to throw that little old screen to him. And I seen him out there because he was out almost in front of me, and I sort of laid and waited. Of course, that quarterback, he looked down the field, and all of a sudden he went over there, and when he did, I picked her off. And the quarterback circled. He come in. I had my eye on that end zone about the 5-yard line. Here he come, and I thought, you ain't stopping me. If I'm this close, I'm going on in. And after I fell in the end zone and scored my touchdown, they 2 or 3 just come and just drill me on the ground. And they called a penalty. Yeah. We got the kickoff from their own 45 after that. But I like Billy Joe Williams. That was my moment in the sun.
That was your hoorah moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, Billy Joe. We found in the stat book, Billy Joe scored one the year before.
Yeah.
Did he?
Yeah.
That Madison game.
Oh, in the Madison.
Interception.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. I can't remember. I will say one more thing about the quarterback thing. There was some laps in that too that didn't go over well with one of them.
It might have been part of the decision.
Yeah, I'm afraid that was the hard part of it. Both of them was stubborn and wouldn't give an inch. Well, now we still had a good year anyway with Paul and.
I believe the record showed that the first time we'd ever beat Somerset. We've played them about 4 times through the years. That's the first time T-ville ever beat Somerset.
That was up there, wasn't it?
No, it was over here, but we went up there and beat them the next year.
Yes, we did.
And
I
then we
started
never played them again.
Bobby Hamilton and that group.
Yeah.
Well, here in a year or so, if the realign, they're going to be in our district. Not this season, not this coming season, but I think the next season.
Well, they've been solid all through the years.
Yeah, they're going to be back on their schedule. Some of them. Ricky knows what their name is.
The Briar Jumpers.
That's a unique one, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. What is a Briar Jumper?
I reckon it's a
Blackberry or something. Patch.
But Coach Ricky mentioned the fact that Coach McClendon gave him a hint on playing that back from where he lined up, but we didn't point out, because you talked about it was you and Coach Pettit, Frank Pettit. I guess Frank had the offense, but I think, through the years, I'll let Coach Miller explain this, because I know he won't want to toot his own horn, but, this man right here is he's a defensive genius. And, for many, many years, on into the 80s, he did a great job coaching that defense.
Sure did. The one story I want to tell on him is the first year that I coached, Larry Moore's first year, and we was getting ready to play Greene County. And Greene County was rated second in Class AA, behind Mayfield, when the state had Deaton and all them Canute boys and all. But anyway, we practiced the 4 all through, once we get ready to do the season. We planned on running the 4, the whole season much. And I never will forget, I was sitting in the office, and it was the week before the game finally. Of course, we'd been in summer practice, first game. But anyway, he sort of rubbed his chin. He said, Coach, talking to Larry, he said, they're going to be waiting on that 4. He said, we might ought to stick something else in, at practice. He said, let me have Wednesday and Thursday. And Wednesday was on live, pads, and then Thursday walk through. But he said, showed them the 5 defense, and the only time I ever know we run it called that eagle backside.
Yeah.
And sure enough, they went right down the field and scored the first time Greene County did. And the second and third time they had the ball, they was headed down the field and they fumbled. That's the only thing that saved us. And he didn't do it till halftime. And halftime, he said, boys, you remember what we practiced that other defense, that 5 eagle, and we went to it and they never had stymied them. Of course, they hadn't, wasn't expecting that 5. But that was.
They had a good team.
Yeah.
They really did.
Yeah. Well, I guess it might have been the newspaper after that Somerset game. While we're talking about defense, it mentioned 3 guys in particular, and we've sort of mentioned 1 or 2 of them, I think, already. But and Coach Pettit's comments on these guys, he mentioned, we talked about Bill Bashan, and we've talked about Paul. I don't know if we've mentioned Johnny. And of course, he went on to a great career at Western. But the comment that Coach Pettit made about him was he loves to hit, because that is the name of the game. Now he wasn't a senior that year. He said Paul's a senior, Johnny wouldn't have been. But
no.
What about Johnny Bashan and his contribution to that team?
Well, Johnny was a big old boy too, just like Bill. Yeah. He didn't have the weight on him maybe, but I thought Johnny was probably as good as Bill at certain things. At his when he went on to Western, and him and who else was that? I was trying to think. Well, anyway, it's gone.
Yeah. Of course, the other 2, another guy that we sort of mentioned was Gary Spears. He talked about old Gary. Gary was not very tall, but he was
built to the ground,
broad,
concrete block,
and looked like very strong.
He was very strong. You couldn't move him. As Aunt Rick said, he was built to the ground.
Yeah.
But that whole team was. It just wasn't 1 or 2 or 3. That whole defensive group was great, wasn't it?
It sure was.
They were.
He come out of Tennessee too, and a little recruiting took place, couldn't they?
Yeah.
He
Oh.
lived just over the line, going toward
Oh,
Miles.
Gary, yeah, right down there.
Yeah.
But
Now, the other one that I can remember, and Coach Pettit mentioned him, he said he was the quickest player that he believed he had ever had. And I believe he played the nose guard, didn't
all of it.
he? Yeah.
Paul was quicker, as we said, we used to call him the Cobra. He'd strike and he'd strike again. Quicker than lightning. Those centers just absolutely couldn't get him, could they? They just couldn't get him. And they'd try to double team him and he'd squirm and get through somehow. He was just so quick. I thought sometimes we ought to have been running him on offense. Truthfully, he was. And he wasn't afraid to hit. He's about 100 and what, maybe 65 pounds or something, and they're playing nose man.
And I bet you that year, John, I bet you that he tackled the quarterback who was just spinning around to hand the ball to a back. He tackled the quarterback before the quarterback could even hand the ball off 3 or 4 times. And I bet you a dozen times more he tackled the quarterback just as he lunged and got rid of it. Now that's how quick he got back there.
Now, did he have an assigned hole, or was it?
No,
he
just
was on his
turned
own which way he wanted to go?
Whichever one. Well, sorted to the strong set, but he was so quick it didn't make no difference where we put him.
Yeah.
He usually played him sort of head up, I think. And he just quick.
Now his name will come up again in that in a famous game when we get down there to it later on in the season. But I can remember him.
You remember Paul?
Yeah, of course. I lived on 5th Street, and I'd be down there to a lot of the practices, of course, all the games. But I can still remember his quickness.
Oh boy!
On the defensive side, the third game after the Somerset game was at Russellville, and you've already talked about the stadium, the field, how old it is. We still play at that stadium.
Same stadium
today. Occasionally, we've played there some in the last few years. And that game ended up 8-0. Have any memories of that game? Either one of you?
I can tell you how it started. They kicked off to us, and we let the kickoff roll dead, and they fell on it about the 10-yard line.
Right.
Coach Pettit had told them about field and punch. If you're in doubt, just get away from it, and didn't have to ascertain the difference, between it and the kickoff. And we did. They let it roll. Of course, they just didn't know no better. But now we held them out of the end zone.
Yes, we did. We sure did.
We scored. We got a safety on them later in the game, but now we somehow got a touchdown. Missed the extra point. Beat them 8-0.
That was a defensive battle.
That's when Rodney Dickerson made KO'd him to come to the right sideline. He said, "Watch for lunch" or something like that.
Yeah, they addled him out there. Rodney was a good one, though, I'll tell you that. That whole bunch was just great. But that Russellville game, 8-0, is that what you said?
8-0. It was on September the 12th. That was the third game that year.
Did we score the touchdown or the touchback, or not?
Yeah, we got a safety on them.
Safety is what I mean. Which one did we score first?
The touchdown.
The touchdown, okay. I couldn't remember. I knew we led them for a while.
Now, did they get close again? Other than
Not
the first
really.
kickoff, they never got close.
No, we played that game.
Come up midfield maybe one more time.
Yeah, we did. That's where it was played after we scored, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Punting back and forth.
Then we got them back. I don't really remember how we got that safety. You?
No, I know which end it was on. It was on that elevated end.
But
I don't
up the hill.
know how we got it.
Okay, I can't. Somehow I don't pick that safety out somehow.
Yeah.
I don't remember it.
No, I remember it.
Now Bob Bowles, he didn't write that.
I remember it was score, but
I've got it in my scrapbook.
I've read
when I get it, bring it up here.
Yeah, Ricky didn't have his scrap. I wish he had his scrapbook tonight, but Bob wrote some good articles in other years, but evidently he wasn't writing the articles this year, and they didn't have many details on it. They just said that we did win 8-7 or 8-0 that game.
You know, one reason talking about that bunch, Coach, they had played for 2 years. Really, you know, there wasn't many. Well, in the class before them was Kelly Gold, and David Young was about all there was. The seniors, you know, in front of them. So all, you know, that they played so much, they done it all.
That's true. They had a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And they were just tough too. I just tell you. Oh Lordy. Paul, Rodney, all of them. They just.
And if you remember, we had a fundraiser, a veterans game over here 10 years, 15 after that, and Ronnie Davis plays in it and breaks his leg. You remember that? Yeah.
Oh, Ronnie was
loving every minute of it.
Oh yeah, Ronnie was. He was a good boy. He'd do. He'd get in there and slobber with him.
Alumni game. That's what it's called.
Alumni game, and broke his leg. Lord have mercy.
There were not really no details on any of the other games in the paper that I could find until the end of the season, but we'll go down the schedule and see if you may have some. September 19th, we hosted Greensburg. September 26th, we went to Lafayette. October 3rd, we hosted Glasgow. And then the schedule got a little easier, I guess. We played at Cumberland, at Caverna, and at Metcalf before we ended the season at home against Campbellsville, and then at Warren County.
Yeah.
Right. No, Warren County.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was here, wasn't it?
Well, no, that was the year before when John was in the running. You know, that was one game. Now, there was another man scored his only touchdown in his life that season too in that Metcalf game, Freddie Moody.
Moody?
Yeah. Picked up a fumble and run it. Sure did.
Oh.
I would say probably Cumberland, Caverna, Metcalf was probably one too difficult.
No.
What about Glasgow at home that year? Did we get them?
Beat them 12-0 and should have beat them 120-0. They were really down.
Yes,
we fumbled 6 times and lost 5 of them. We just played. I'd say they was going for the ball. You know what I mean? Putting them helmets on.
The way they thought they had a chance, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But they were. What was the score?
12-0.
12-0.
So another.
Well, we had enough yardage in that to have scored.
Yeah.
Another zero. A lot of zeros that year.
Yeah, that defense it was top
Like I say, Mount Sterling 6, Somerset 0, Russellville 0, Glasgow 0. I'd like to see all the scores just to see how many points we gave up, and we'll get to the
Campbellsville. That game 0. Campbellsville tried to pass on every down in the second half against us. Played it on Thursday night because they didn't want to come down here on Halloween. I don't blame them.
Oh, wait, no. But they were throwing the ball around, wasn't they?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Did Warren County have anything for us after we beat them 50 points the year before when we went down there?
I believe it's 54-12. We beat them down there that next year. Never played them again. Or they didn't play us. I think.
They took us off the schedule. Oh.
They've had enough of us.
I think they had a change of coaches too. Got old Jim fired. Oh.
The Caverna game, they had them Doyle twins. They played us tough for about 3 quarters.
Yes, they did.
We finally squirted on out on them.
They had some good athletes.
You know who was coaching Caverna that night? Sam Clark.
Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Sam.
Mm-hmm. Sure was.
What? Little rascal.
Yeah. He had them ready for us.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, he was.
No, I'm not supposed to anyway.
Now, was that his first head coaching job?
It was.
At Caverna? He
All right.
started Glasgow.
Yeah, as assistant.
Yeah.
And then he went from Caverna to Campbellsville.
Yeah.
And then to Western. And then, of course, took this when we consolidated the Falcon job.
Yeah. I'll have to ask him about those Caverna years, about that game sometime.
Well, he had some good athletes.
Yeah. They'd ruled that 8-man for years.
Yeah, yeah.
And they went to 11-man about the year before, two years before.
Yeah.
They
Of course, the Doyles seemed like they were Lewis's age, set class of 72.
They were.
But I'm sure they were good at
baseball.
Brian and Blake, they won the state championship. Did they win? Or was
Yeah, Caverna won it twice. Caverna won it Bill's senior year, I believe. In '55 they won it, and then they won it that when them twins were there.
And they had the twins.
That older brother of theirs, played on that other team that won it. Yeah. Denny Doyle. Yeah.
Denny Doyle.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the season, we made the playoffs. And I guess maybe one of the more memorable games in the history of Tompkinsville High School. We had played Russellville over there, and then we got to play Russellville over here. Now, how was the playoffs determined then? Because now we talk about being a district. Who did we have to beat? Or how did you get into the playoffs then? Do you remember how that?
Well, they just took one team then.
From
districts.
It was a district.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, that was when we played Russellville. That was for the regional championship because, they just.
Now was Glasgow a district game?
Yeah, of course we beat them. See, that's why we beat them. Qualified for it.
Cumberland, those all district games.
Yeah.
Campbellsville,
Metcalf.
Of course, there weren't as many classes then. Was there?
There was just the three then.
3 classes.
A and double A and the only triple A was all Louisville.
The big C.
Yeah. Even the bigger ones out in the state, they were double A.
Yeah.
3 classes.
So
and that was rough on some of them Louisville schools. Of course, they were a lot of them big, but now some of them weren't all that big, but yet they had to play triple A football.
But we got to host Russellville over here. But we didn't play on Friday night. What happened that it got postponed?
Snow up to ears. No, it did come a big snowstorm. But Bardstown, which we will play, they played their game. We went and we got word that they're going to go ahead and play it. And Frank got word, so we take off that snow to go scout them. And we got up there and they had snow as high as this ceiling all the way around at it like a big bowl. It was frozen. It was you couldn't do
Who'd
nothing.
they play? Remember?
Owen County.
Owen.
And we froze to death. And Floney Ferguson and Ross over here. When I was worried about it. Can you audit that out?
Wasn't Ricky's brother, was
No,
it?
over here.
Larry Taylor?
Larry Taylor's brother. Talk with us.
Roy Cecil.
Roy Cecil.
You told me the other day and I couldn't remember. Roy Cecil.
And Ferguson went with us. And they just had a little jacket on. And of course, me and Frank was trying to get to play. It is so cold. But it paid off on. We set our game up then for Monday afternoon. And we had the awfulest struggle with Russellville that's ever been. It wasn't nothing but a defensive game, if you ever heard or saw one.
The stats, and the paper had the stats on that game. It said that rushing, we had 142 yards rushing, and Russellville 110. John 9 for 52, and Paul 13 for 46. Holding John Carroll at 52.
You dang gone right, buddy. They were tough.
Somebody got 8 or 10 more than they just tell who got the other 10.
No, right. It may have. I only wrote those two down. Yeah. Yeah, that's 98 of the 142.
Oh, it's more than left
Yeah.
over. Really.
Probably Leroy,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, yeah, on
Probably
quarterback
Leroy.
keepers. That's exactly what most of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was played on Monday afternoon. And we sat out there and busted heads with each other.
Was it still cold that Monday
Yes, it
after
was
that?
still cool. Well, it wasn't all that bad, but
It came and went fast.
Yeah.
By Monday, the field was in good shape.
Yeah.
There was definitely no snow, and you'd think it'd be saturated, but the field was very firm.
Well, now, where we were at on that Friday night, it'd come a blizzard at Bardstown. Because it was deep. Lord have mercy. And it wasn't that bad here. I'm going to agree with you. We probably could have played theirs on Friday night. But we didn't. We thought it was better for the crowd and everything.
If you remember, about a year ago, the thought hit me, their Bardstown plays Friday, and we're pushed to Monday. And I come down here and I asked him, I said, why didn't they at least play that on a Saturday afternoon? Mm-hmm. And you told me, he said, Bardstown didn't want to.
Exactly. Ernest Martin ruled up.
Well, that ought to have been their decision.
No, it
that
shouldn't
ought to
have
been
been.
the KHSAA's call
Exactly.
right there.
Exactly.
But it wasn't, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Hey, Lordy.
But the September game at Russellville was 8-0, and of course, if anybody knows anything about Tompkinsville football, they know that the final score of this playoff game was
All.
0. in soccer terms, 0-0. It was another defensive struggle, and nobody scored.
Nobody scored.
Did anybody get close to scoring?
We went down to about their 22 on the 4th Street end in the first half and went for it on 4th down. And then they made it. I tell you what, I don't believe they went by midfield much, maybe twice.
No, that game was fought in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
Except for that one little move that we made down there. I mean, just sitting there butting heads. Nobody could move. Well, as you said, John Carroll had what,
52.
You've got the most famous punt probably in the history of T-ville football in that game.
Yeah. Now, what part of the
Is
game?
that the one
Yeah,
they made?
What part of the game
Steve,
did that happen?
Oh, Steve, yeah.
It was late.
Oh, yeah.
It was maybe 4 minutes to go in the game, and they pushed us back. We was inside when Steve caught the ball. He was in the end zone, maybe a yard. Yeah. And so we snapped it 10 yards. We're pushed back to our own 11-yard line, and I'm thinking I'm the backup center. And I'm not centering that ball, but I got to thinking, boy, you see, if David Stevens snaps that over his head, Russellville's going to win 2-0. And I could put myself in that shape, being having to do that snap. Yeah. A lot of pressure on David.
And see, I don't know if Steve Hurt was the punter, and he would have only been a sophomore that year.
He hit the prettiest spiral you've ever seen. The guy, he could have maybe tried to catch it over his shoulder, but he smartly just got away, and it rolled and rolled. Went from down to about their 40. It was about a 60-yard punt. And that the game was over then. They wasn't going nowhere. And that's when it went to overtime.
Yeah. So it went to overtime. Today we get it on the 10-yard line. Each team gets it on the 10-yard line. But they did it a little bit differently back then, and had that method of determining overtime, was that the first year they tried that? Is that right?
Yes.
And the winner was, of course, I guess you could score, but the winner, how was the winner determined?
Whoever traveled the furthest from the opponent's goal line. Well, it'd be from the own goal, whatever. Whoever went up the field the furthest.
Yeah. So,
and I've always wondered, what about it? Did the punt count? Apparently, in other words, they punted and it went out of bounds, so that was a marked spot there. But say they punt and we catch and run it 30 yards. Did they go as far as the punt went, or? Whatever. The officials, they talked for 5 or 10 minutes before they started it. I'm sure they had the rules in their pocket.
Well, yeah, that one official came over to us and said, "Coach, you don't have to do nothing."
Of course, we kicked off, didn't we? We kicked off.
Yeah.
Did they flip the coin to see who would kick off first?
I'm sure they did.
Of course, usually you want to go on defense first
Yeah.
to see what the other.
You know, I can't remember, but I'm sure that's what.
It didn't much matter on this format.
No.
But I know, they kicked toward 4th Street and we did too. So after they got their try, then we, whatever.
Reverse field.
Yeah.
Now they did have a good record. Most of the front page of the paper was a story about this game. So they did have a good record of this. Russellville got the ball on the 24-yard line. The first play they didn't gain any yardage. And you know who made the first tackle? Paul Evans for no gain. The second play, he got through the line of scrimmage and he made the tackle.
In the backfield.
Now, it's a little bit, it said a 9-yard loss back to the 16, but it was at the 24. So it was either a 9-yard loss to the 15 or an 8-yard loss to the 16.
He tackled him in the backfield.
He threw him for a loss.
I can't believe they lost 9 yards
No, I don't either.
on a half-back handoff.
Yeah. According to that, it was either an 8 or a 9-yard loss.
Yeah.
According to the paper. So it's 3rd and long, and they try to pass. It just said it was an incomplete pass. And then
the shank of the year.
And then they punted. To the 32.
32.
Yeah. Well, actually, I guess they got it out of tape measure, 32 yards and 17 inches. That's what it said.
From
the goal
from
line.
their own goal line.
Yeah.
From our goal line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Went out over there on our side where we stood, the baseball diamond
The
side.
baseball field. So I guess it went out in the dirt.
And they didn't measure that. He done knew that official did.
Yeah, they had
He said you don't have to do nothing.
Okay.
Except snap it 4 times.
Yeah. So they kicked. So Rick, you said they switched around and kicked in the same direction. And let's see. It said John Carroll fielded it about the 25-yard line, but there was a whistle that stopped the play. And Ricky remembered what happened.
Eddie Prophet's dog made a cameo appearance just as they was kicking.
Ow.
And I was of course I was on the sideline, but I heard the referee. He was blowing his whistle and running and going like that just about the time the foot hit the ball. And like it said, John caught it on the dead run at the 25. He'd have been at that past there where he'd have been at the 40 in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And we didn't like the call, but
So,
but better things were coming.
Oh yeah, we didn't know what was coming, didn't we?
So had John, I guess John, he was the regular return man.
Yeah.
Had he ever returned any kickoffs for touchdowns?
Yeah, he had 3 or 4 that year.
3 or 4.
Yeah.
With the speed he had. So they had to kick again, and they kicked out of bounds, it said. And of course now you get it on the 35. That would have we'd have still had it.
Yeah.
But back then you got it on the 40.
40.
And that's when you said the referee comes over and tells you.
Tells us that you don't have to do that.
I'm gonna have to look at my scrapbook. I believe Bill wasn't talking. I believe it's more like the 39 or something. Don't you?
Yeah.
Cause Leroy would take the ball and back up and kneel down. And Frank, we was fixing to be back where they went. Frank took time out.
Because we just had, what was it, the 3 yards or something?
Of course, it said
Don't give you the.
It said they ended up on the 32 yards and 17 inches.
More like the 38 and a half.
32 and 17. And it said on the first play, it said Leroy gained a couple of yards on first down. That's what it said. It sort of ran up into the line.
Yeah.
And then Frank, and he said, Coach
I don't
Pettit,
remember that.
He said Coach Pettit told him,
Start naming names.
don't do that. Just go down.
Don't back
Don't
up.
run up in there. Just go down, and we got
2
him
more
one.
snaps in there.
But no, it does not say. Well, it doesn't say where the ball ended up, but evidently it was somewhere there around the 40 yard.
40,
line.
yeah.
Yeah. So we won. We won by yardage.
We won, but we lost. That game killed us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They were a good team.
Now, I mentioned that you might say something about it. We'll come back and talk about Mount Sterling again. But was it possible that Russellville and Tompkinsville were the two best teams in the state, but we knocked each other out in that in that game?
Well, of course, I'm biased. I thought we was the best team in the whole thing, just to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But they come to play, and they laid with us.
You know what I've always thought, Bardstown, once they beat us, they I'm not saying they overlook, you don't overlook somebody in a championship game, but I would think they think, boys, we've got it now. We've knocked T-ville out, you know. Because they know we beat Mount Sterling pretty good.
Yeah.
If we hadn't fumbled twice inside the 10, we'd have beat them about 24-6.
Yes.
That was the first game of the season.
Yeah, we fumbled twice inside our own 10,
we played.
getting ready to score.
Yeah.
We played a little better than what the score showed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so the Russellville game ends up being played on Monday. And then ordinarily you'd be practicing, getting ready for your Friday night game. So you had Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to get ready to play Bardstown.
And we were bummed up too.
Yeah.
Really.
Gary Spears' shoulder was gone.
Well, they told that in the paper that said Gary played only one play in the second half of the
Really?
Russellville game.
I
So it was a shoulder.
Yeah. He didn't play anything.
He hurt that the year before.
Yeah.
He had trouble with it all through from that point on.
But that game was, what was that one?
And it was on November the 21st at Bardstown 15 and Tompkinsville 7 was the score. That would have been the state semifinal.
Right.
That was a good game too, but we couldn't get that quarterback. He was sort of elusive, wasn't he? I can't remember his name.
You remember the halfback pass when they pushed Leroy down?
Oh, yeah. But that game was, we were in it. We just messed around. They got it. I don't know. We just couldn't get nothing going offensively, could we?
No, they were pretty tough.
They were tough on D. They stopped us pretty cold. I don't know what the stats on that one was.
It didn't
give any.
No, didn't have any stats on that one game.
We botched a punt and give them the ball about the 20-yard line early in the game. They got ahead 7-0, and we just never recovered.
No, we didn't really.
No.
We just sat out there, knocked heads the rest of the game. They scored it. Oh, we did score, didn't we?
Yeah.
And then
they got a safety on us, didn't they?
Yeah.
15-6, that what it is?
15-7. So
15. Oh, they only did one safety.
Oh.
See, till they get that safety, we're 13. It's 13-7 then, ain't it?
Yeah. We were within
Shoot, yeah. But I just remember
difference.
they just didn't control that game. You know what I mean? They well
did.
prepared, yeah.
They did. Of course, they had her out. They had 2 more days rest than we did.
You got to go scout them. I guess they came and scouted you
Well, I'm sure
on that Monday.
Why, yeah. They were here.
Yeah.
Sure were.
And of course, I guess you're filming on the old 18 millimeter, whatever. I don't guess you had any film exchange, but did you have film exchange in those days?
Not much. Not much. We had maybe 1 or 2. Not many.
You had to do in-person scouting.
Coach, nothing. Dr. Bajan was a filmer, if you remember. It took a while to get that stuff back. So you didn't have time to exchange much with anyone.
You know the past. I've never told you this. Johnny Bashan says that game's my fault. I said, Johnny, you explain that to me. He said, Coach Mack had told me for 2 years, when you're on defense and somebody's ready to pass, you make sure don't jump, don't get faked out by a pump throw. and on the halfback pass, he said, I fell for it. He said the guy, and Johnny jumped and he stepped around Johnny, and they threw it, the halfback threw it in the end zone, and the guy come behind. Now, the coach's son, I had classes with him at Westernville, Garnis Martin's son.
Garnis Martin.
Yeah, and he's the one that caught it.
Caught the pass.
Yeah. And he said the only thing I knew, he said, I knew it was going to be a penalty on me, but and this is a coach's son for you. He said, but I know it's just 15-yard penalty, and he said that's why I pushed him down. And really, he said, I didn't know where the ball was, and he said it just hit right in my belly and stuff.
So
that's what he said.
He pushed Leroy Tooley.
Yeah. He give him body. Yeah. And Leroy stumbled forward. About the time he did, here come that ball, hit him right in the gut. And it's either in the end zone or on the one or the two.
But the official didn't see anything.
Have you ever heard have you ever heard they had to grab Cass Napier by the back of the pants to keep him from going on the field after that referee? Yeah. I've heard that from two different people.
Oh,
Cass was hot.
Okay.
They said they grabbed him back there, like that. He's going after that referee.
Oh,
it was over to the side too, where the fans could see it real clear.
Yeah.
Whatever. Don't say it goes, whatever.
Yeah. As you said earlier, the rest is history. But Bardstown goes on to play Mount Sterling, the team that we beat the first game of the season, and then Mount Sterling won the state championship. I wonder if you remember one from Mount Sterling lost any other games that year?
They probably didn't, maybe one or something. Of course, they played some of them bigger schools up in there, Clark County, some of them. But I remember, of course, they had an old UK basketball coach coaching them, a guy named Charlie Ishmael. Do you remember?
Yeah.
You remember that? And of course, apparently he was pretty football minded too, but he played for Rupp.
Yeah.
Yeah, he sure did.
He was coaching Mount Sterling.
He was tough, basketball, and he was coaching Mount Sterling.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you've told me something that I didn't know. I didn't know that
You talking about
Charlie had a football mind.
Man, I know it.
Oh, Lordy.
You was talking about Johnny a while ago, but I remember it's in my scrapbook. They was talking to Coach Ishmael about the game. He said we had no idea that they were that fast, and he said we knew Hamilton and the backs were, but he said the Bashan boy on defense. He said he almost ran by our quarterback about twice when he was back there trying to pass. He was so fast.
Oh, Charlie Ishmael.
And good Johnny was defensive end.
Yeah.
That's what he played at Western too.
Yeah. Big jump.
No, well, that wrapped up the fall of '69 football season. That we wanted to hear from you about Coach McClendon. Is there any other? Of course, I know that was I remember going to that game. About the only thing I can remember that was sort of cold. I remember going to the car at halftime.
Yeah, it pretty cold.
To get warmed up.
Yeah.
And I thought for years that Bardstown was a bad
Place to be.
I was just about 10 years old. It seemed like we went to Campbellsville or something a year or two later, and there was a sign there that said Bardstown. And I said, "Oh, that's a bad place, Bardstown." But,
Hey, Lordy.
of course, they're back pretty good now. I think Coach Clark's son maybe is out. He's going to get out. But 12, 15 years ago, we mastered them a couple of times over here.
Then they beat them up there another time in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Darkest field I ever was up there that night.
Yeah, when Monroe County played them a few years ago, that was with, I think that was one of the years that Fort Campbell that beat us here. I think we beat them a couple of times pretty badly. They weren't very good. That was first round games. We got them back, but it would have been nice if we could have got them back in 1969.
Wait a minute, something.
That was another cold one. That was that Bardstown game over there. Oh, boy, that was a cold one.
Yeah. Well, any other thoughts or memories you have of that '69 year that you'd like to?
I've got one. There's no doubt that the worst athletic endings to the main sports was 69. Because the football ended that way, and then the basketball lost that double overtime game to Franklin Simpson in the region. And Franklin goes on and wins the region. So that was a double bad ending for the Bears in 69.
But we had some good athletes. And I want to thank them all for playing. Because they did a great job.
Like I said, I was just a little fella and lived 2 blocks from the school. That was the teams that I first remember, and they were my heroes. John Carroll, and the Bashan. Of course, just lived down the street from the Bashans.
And Lord, we've not mentioned the man that played 10 years in the NFL, have we?
No,
we haven't even mentioned him. Was he on the other defensive end?
Yeah.
Pretty good
Junior,
guy.
he was a junior.
Yeah, pretty good guy standing over there, Mr. Elos Grooms. But now Elos, of course, he was a good sized young man, but he became a real man when he went to Cookville.
Now he didn't play no whole lot the first half of that year. He's still scrawny and skinny, and he put on a little weight, but by the end of the year he was pretty good over at that other end.
Yeah.
Gosh, Johnny coming from one end and Elos to the other, and Johnny always told Elos, I'll beat you at the quarterback.
Well, he lifted weights now, let me tell you. He was a little scrawny, but his legs were skinny to start with, and they just wouldn't, and he wouldn't work on them either like he should. Yeah. He wanted to get this big 6-pack up here and get in front of that mirror every day. He'd be the last one to leave the weight room. Yeah. And he'd come up there and he'd get in front of that mirror. But he never did put much on his legs.
Yeah. Well, let's close with that. Let's talk about those two. Johnny went to Western and Elos went to Tennessee Tech. What was the recruiting experience like with them? Were a lot of other schools looking at them, or how did they choose? How did they make
Western, of course, was one of the main ones in the pile. They wanted Johnny. They thought Johnny.
Because Paul was already down there, I guess, wasn't he?
Yeah. Or no, he was at UK.
He was at UK.
He was at UK. Yeah, that's where he got hurt, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Anyway, I forgot where it was at.
You said Western wanted Johnny.
Yeah, Western wanted Johnny. The recruiter was, Clark was about halfway, and then what's his name?
When Robbie Franklin was it?
No.
Of course, at that time, Romeo Cornell was there.
Yeah, he was.
Nah, we hadn't hit him yet.
Yeah.
He was the one that was recruiting here. What did you say?
Wasn't Butch, was it?
He's in that picture that took when they signed Johnny.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he would come and he would look at him. We got to have Bashan. Says if we can sign him, we've got a bunch of others that's going to fall in the line too. And that's all he would. And he didn't really look. And I told him, I said, now let me tell you something. We got a man that's on the other side of the end. I said, he's just as good and maybe stronger. No, we've got to help Bashan. I said, well, I'm telling you, we got another one over there on that end. Of course, Elois went on to Tech, and Johnny went on to Western, and then, of course, they met. And old Watch McClendon come by me, and he says, every time I see you, I'm just going to bend over and let you kick my rear end.
It wasn't Murray, was he?
Yes, it was. That's who it was. He said, just kick it. He said, you told me. And he said, we've had to fight him for, I guess, 3 years? I don't know if they got to play 4 or not, but 3 for sure.
They were both all OVC.
Oh,
yeah. Their senior year, they was on the first team. Both of them come from same high school. That's a fact.
That's something.
It is.
Well, they were two good ones. Yeah. But he said, yeah, just kick me.
I don't know. I guess it'd been about his junior year. Of course, Johnny starting midway through his freshman year. they had an all-OVC that got hurt and give Johnny his chance. I remember that. But I'd say it might have been his sophomore year or maybe junior before Elos got starting down there.
That's what I was getting ready to say.
He just kept building himself up. But anyway, they was playing at Western. I was at the game, and Western was running the sweep, and Elos was in pursuit. And Elos, I believe he just sort of timed it, let him get another step closer to the sideline, and he just tackled the runner right into Western's bench. I seen bodies flying everywhere. Elos sort of got up and cleaned himself off.
He was strong.
Now, were they
In the upper body.
Were they still playing up on top of the hill in that game? Or were they down in where they play now?
Yeah.
I didn't know when they moved down the hill.
Yeah, they've been down there several years. They've 5 or 6
I've
years.
been to I remember going, it was my uncle's graduation in '68 up on the hill, the old football field there. Yeah. But, yeah, those were two, like I say, very unusual for two from the same graduating class to get to that level on the college game.
And even on into the pros.
Yeah.
Of course, Johnny went, but he didn't stay long, did he?
No.
I can't remember.
Well, last man cut it the preseason.
That's what I thought.
And you know,
He
Elos, I remember the story on him. He played about 9.5 years. And of course, when you're out, you're out. It's a business. And their pensions are marked into intervals. And they went on.
He missed it?
No, yeah, but the NFL went on strike and they brought in them replacement players. You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And Elos got to play. He got him into that 10 years.
Well,
That's
good.
what I heard. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Good. So he got his 10-year mark.
Yeah, that's what I've understood. Played for both the Saints and the
St.
Cardinals.
Louis, I think.
St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah. I think he ended there at the Cardinals.
But those was two good players.
Yeah. They got their pictures over there in the field house. They got one of Johnny's signed. He's got a message. I don't know when he sent it. It's been there a long time. He's sitting on the bench at Western. He always had the arm pads on. That picture's over there for the young people to still see. And the one of Elois is larger, but he probably doesn't get him sacked because he's throwing past Joe Montana. He's in hot pursuit about to lay his hands on Joe Montana.
Oh, man.
But, he scored a touchdown finally.
Did he?
Yeah. A tackle eligible pass, I believe.
Is that right?
Yeah. Now, what he's doing offensive tackle, I don't know. But I believe the record show Elos Gruden scored a touchdown in the NFL.
Yeah.
Now, I bet it's during that replacement year.
I'd say it was.
Might have been.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we come back, Coach McClendon, I know you still got a lot of good stories to tell. We need to come back and talk to you about consolidating. And you went all the way from football. Well, before that, we need to talk about that early '80s football team that your son played on. That was fine. That was a really good team.
They were.
We need to come back and talk about them.
They were probably nearly as good as this team we've been talking about.
Yeah. And then talk to you about
defensively. Now we were lacking just a little offense.
But then you left the football field and got into coaching girls basketball. But I know you did a really good job there. You had some really good teams at the end of Tompkinsville and Monroe County.
Yes.
But your forte was always coaching that defense on football.
Yeah.
And, if we could,
I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
It was, listen, but when you got good athletes, it's a little easier to coach that stuff. And we had some good ones all the way through.
You got to have both.
Oh, yeah, you sure do.
Yeah.
And very few years that, we slacked up any.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned one year there we was 8-1 before, and nobody even thinks about that.
Yeah. But hopefully we can have another evening sometime.
Well, yeah.
If you don't care, we'll come back and talk about what was that, the fall of 80 or 81 or I was in college at the time, but that little Bill was playing and that team.
Oh yeah, he played 81, yeah.
The fall of 81.
81, yeah.
But,
They were You know, that bunch still sticks together.
They have a reunion.
They have a reunion every year.
Yeah.
Sure do. And it's good.
Yeah. We'll come back.
I missed this year,
Was
but
this guy on the coaching staff for that
Yeah.
team? Yeah. We'll come back and talk about that team sometime. We've kept you long enough tonight. We appreciate you visiting with us.
well, I appreciate you coming. I like to talk this old stuff anyway, so if I can just remember, that's my problem
Well,
now.
that's why we brought Ricky Miller along.
He's good. He did well.
Put you two together, you can remember.
Yeah.
So again,
Pop
it
back.
is April 20, what is this, the 25th?
25th.
2024. We've been visiting with Ricky Miller and Bill McClendon, and we just wanted to get some of your stories documented for future generations. And, we appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good beer,
Thank you.
John. Thank you.
Thank you.